we're back for another casual conversation with the classic. And man, is this going to be a casual conversation because I didn't come in here as prepared, but I'm here with someone I've wanted on the show for a very long time. I think I've been trying since last year when I originally started this show before I brought it back. I tried to get you and Frankie on here, but we got Danny LoPriore. How's it going, man? How are you?
How's it going, brother? How are you?
I'm good, man. I so badly want to call you LoPriore, and I don't know why.
I think a lot of people think my last name is French, but it's actually Italian. But it's the best of both worlds. Sometimes I can be French, sometimes I can be Italian. It just depends. Depends what the audience is.
Fair enough. Give me 1 second. I'm going to edit this part out. I just realized that someone used this audio. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sweet. I actually thought it was like a French last name too, and I don't know why. Do you have any French in you at all?
No, not at all.
No. Well, welcome to the show.
One piece of French. Thank you, man.
I wanted to have you on here for a while. It really has been, man. I think you guys are hilarious. I've been watching you guys' stuff forever. Obviously, you've been on a handful of podcasts, whether it was the Basement Yard, the Stank podcast. Now you have the LoPriore. See, almost a LoPriore. Yeah. You see that? Yeah, podcast with your brother. And you guys have just been, like, the one thing I will say, like, I call this casual conversations, but out of all those shows, every single one of them, when I listen to it, it is the most, like, laid back, chilled, casual conversations, but just ridiculous. Like, how do you guys find the stuff you guys talk about? Like, where does it come from?
Well, I feel like whenever we're doing shows, whether it was the Basement Yard or the Stank or the LoPriore podcast, like even like my mental health podcast off the cuff now, I think there's like a certain essence of like, well, one, when you talk to people so much in a regular setting, you build a rapport. So it's like you're basically having a conversation with that person anyway. But we like to just kick it up a little bit because the more ridiculous it is, the better content it is. So like, if you can remember every drunk conversation you've ever had, they're ridiculous. So it's having drunk conversations, basically, asking drunk questions.
That's literally what it feels like. Either drunk or like stoned, like, or you just got stoned and you just sit there and you start shooting the shit. Like, that's what it feels like every time I've listened to them.
That's the best thing about those kinds of shows because they're evergreen. You know what I mean? Like, you could do whatever you want with them. You could go wherever you want. So like a lot of times, like we have like a couple talking points that we want to hit to like structure the shows, but most of it's just being able to have like, you know, that rapport with somebody and being able to go off the top. A lot of it's improv. 98% of all those shows are improv, really. And it's just about bringing what you can bring to the table, whether it's funny, whether it's smart, whether it's, you know, insightful. That's what we're just trying to do with all the shows. And, you know, I think Joe and Frankie are doing a great job on Basement Yard. And me and my brother we just started. We have close to 20,000 total downloads. We've been up for a day and a half.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so like, you know, we're having a lot of fun doing what we're doing, and it's been like a dream to work with my brother because that's somebody I have an amazing rapport with.
Yeah,
you know,
I think that's key.
Talking shit.
I think that's key for anyone that's looking to do a podcast or start a podcast or like any type of situation. Like, I think it's very key to be able to do it with someone that you already kind of have a rapport with because it's just that natural chemistry. Like someone that like you're okay just like saying whatever to because people can pick up on it. They can sense it. Like you can tell when someone, for example, like I've done a few wrestling podcasts in time, and you can tell when I'm talking to someone who's just like really agreeing with me a lot, and they don't know what to call me out of my bullshit or be like, Justin, you don't really believe that. Stop like look at Mr. Propaganda. Like when I'm with someone that says that shit, they know exactly because as a wrestling classic, I'll sometimes try to play neutral and act like, oh, I like this. And they're like, no, you don't. Like, why are you lying? And like, there's that natural chemistry that you only get with people that really know you.
Yeah, and I think if people say yes to stuff all the time, the show's not entertaining.
It's not. You want someone that disagrees with you. Like, I know when people come onto the TWC show and they want to really agree with me a lot. We'll talk about wrestling, even though this podcast, I don't care what we talk about. But when people come on the TWC show, like, they tend to, like, and they're not, like, the guest hosting, because I've had a lot of guest hosts in the past couple of months, and they have this tendency to just agree with me because they either, like, they're just not comfortable enough yet or what, or we don't have that chemistry. And I'm just like, no, like, if you hate Charlotte Flair, and I'm saying good things about Charlotte Flair. You go in about why you hate Charlotte Flair. Like, just say it. Like, tell me you think she's popular just because of her dad or something. Like, you be you. Like, fully. Like,
speaking of Charlotte Flair, though,
yeah,
I agree with you. The more you say yes on shows, the more boring it is. Or unless you have like something to go on top of yes.
yeah,
So like if you say yes and follow it up with something that adds to the conversation, it's a little bit better. But like when people just say yes on shows, there's nothing there. It's not entertaining.
nothing. I don't even know how to.
I'd rather somebody lie and say no just for the sake of the conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
But so with Charlotte Flair, I wanted to see what you thought about like this whole angle, like against like Ric Flair now. Like obviously, like we knew like it was gonna happen. They've done it kind of before, but like, do you think like she should separate from Ric Flair?
I think they should like she should always be separated from Ric Flair now.
It's not like there's no payoff. It's not like they're not gonna fucking wrestle each other.
It's gonna, if this was to elevate Lacey, okay, cool. But do you remember back in the day? Like, did you like? Let's talk about that really quickly. We'll come back to Charlotte. When did you first start watching wrestling?
I was born in 1989. I started watching wrestling that I can remember. 1995, 1996, because I remember the Yankees. It was 1995 because the Yankees lost.
Yeah,
I think the Braves won the World Series in '95. But my grandfather had two things that were amazing. One, he had a black box. So for all the kids out there that aren't listening, a black box was a pay-per-view legal. This was illegal streaming before illegal streaming. Because you had pay-per-view, all the movie channels for free. Someone would come and like give it to you.
it was. So, I had one of those too at my aunt's house. So we watched all the wrestling pay-per-views growing up.
Yeah, so we were able to watch those. My uncle had one, but when I fell in love with wrestling was my grandfather had all the Coliseum videos.
Yeah.
So like all WrestleManias, all like SummerSlams, NWA tapes he had. He had a whole bunch. So I would just literally pop them into the VCR one after another, one after another, one after another. And ever since then, I was like, all right, I'm going to be pretty hooked into this. And very early on, I figured out it was a work, you know?
Yeah.
But for me, it was more of like, you know what? I just think this guy's entertaining. I'm going to watch.
Who stood out to you at first? Like, who were the wrestlers that you were like? Because we have a similar story. I had an older brother who's 10 years older than me. Yeah. And I fortunately grew up on a shitload of VHS tapes of SummerSlams, WrestleMania, Wrestling Challenges, Tuesday Night Titans. Yeah. Not a lot of the NWA stuff, but a lot of like
late 80s. My grandpa was old as shit.
Yeah, no, for sure. My brother's only 10 years old. He's not old as shit, I wouldn't say, even though I say it to him sometimes. But like a lot of the late 80s and all of the mid to early 90s stuff I grew up on because of the same thing. But like, who stood out to you the most when you watched those tapes? Like, who were you like, well, this guy, there's something about him, like, to capture your imagination?
The first guy I remember is Randy Savage.
Yeah, so, that's my guy.
Yeah, so like the tapes I was watching, it's like the Mega Powers or like a thing, you know.
Yeah.
And then Randy Hulk would cut a promo, and then Randy would cut a promo, a little bit smaller, a little bit less jacked, but he could go. And one of the first matches I ever saw, like, was able to be like, wow, this is awesome, was him and Ric Flair at WrestleMania. So that was like, oh man. And then seeing Ric Flair, I was like, yo, this fucking guy's the man too. This guy's swag.
Yeah.
Talks a whole bunch of shit. We can curse on this show, right?
No, 100% knock yourself out.
Okay, all right. So he's talking a whole bunch of shit, you know, and then my grandfather shows me Dusty Rhodes, who was cool, because I was like, this guy's like a fat dude.
Yeah, yeah.
You
how many fat guys did you see that were actually good though? Like, there was a lot of fat guys, but how many top fat guys did you see?
No, not a lot. Not a lot. So I was just like, oh, like this guy's swag is awesome. And then as it got later, then it started to get into, once Hogan went away, like it started getting into like the Survivor, like I would watch the Survivor Series tapes and like I saw Undertaker's like debut on Coliseum video and I was like, oh my God. Because I love Ted DiBiase too, because I just loved his character. Like he was the best. And then I saw like them working together. And then I'm like, whoa, like this Undertaker dude's like, I know he's not dead, but he's fucking scary.
Would you say that you were more of a character guy? Because that's what I
Um,
grew up like, being a character guy. I feel like nowadays people really care about the wrestling thing, and I love the wrestling thing too. But I'm like, the characters what got me hooked.
the characters are what got me hooked, but then it turned into kind of like the characters, the pageantry. It appealed more to kids, right?
Yeah,
So I was very young when I was watching all that stuff. And then as I got a little bit older and like thought like, girls are cool now and like, and this is like before like Stone Cold, really, like before like Stone Cold took over and everything. Like I remember watching Razor Ramon come on Nitro.
yeah.
So I'm like, I was like, whoa, like how does this work? And he's like, he's not saying his name is Razor Ramon, but he's like, he's saying the Chico, like he's still doing like the shtick. And he's like, you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here.
Yeah.
So I was like, yo, this is kind of crazy. And then Diesel shows up, and then I'm like, whoa, like what the fuck is going on? And they start saying their real names. So
That era was fucked. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's no internet back then, so I don't know these are their real names. My older cousin had to tell me that that's his real government name. So then I gradually fell in love with the realism of of wrestling, of pro wrestling. And for me, it literally went like this. So it went Randy Savage. Sorry, my dog's playing with me.
That's all right.
Randy Savage was my guy growing up.
Yeah.
Like when I was little. Then it went more towards the Hitman. Loved Bret Hitman.
Bret's the man. I feel like we had a lot of things in common here, because even the whole thing you were talking about where you're like, oh, I never liked 1A, I always liked like 1B. As a younger brother with an older brother, for some reason I was like, my brother was a Hulkamaniac, and for some reason I'm like, I don't vibe with that. And I always loved Mach, and I love the guy right under. I will say the 90s were a little weird because I did kind of like the top guys. I did like Bret. I did like Austin. But when we came back to recent, I'm like, I hate Cena. But I like Orton. Yeah. I like Edge. Like, I like the 1Bs again, It's weird. But go on. Yeah.
And I feel the same way. So, like, in every era, it was like Mach. Then it was the Hitman. And then DX came. And for me, DX was like the coolest shit in the world. Like you would go to school and tell people to suck it. Like you be on the bus fucking chopping your dick and shit.
I had no idea what it meant. I had no idea I was going to, when I was like 10 or 12, I was probably like not even. I was probably like in grade 6, grade 7, however old you are, then going up to girls being like, suck it, without knowing what exactly that meant. Like what were they sucking? Like, it didn't even click in my head at that point.
I had no idea what suck it meant. I thought it was just like, suck it. Like,
isn't it crazy?
How Bart Simpson would say, eat my shorts.
Yeah, but isn't it crazy? Like, even as a kid, like, you don't know what fuck means, but you always like, fuck you to everybody. And you're like, then you go up, like, why was I telling like random old people, like guys, and like, fuck you? Like, just why is that a swear word? I don't even want to fucking swear word.
No, I had no idea. I would just start cursing, and then later on, I knew it was a curse, but I just fell in love with cursing.
Yeah.
After that point, I wish I cursed less, but fuck it, who cares? But so like once Bret and Shawn Michaels had like the Iron Man match.
Yeah.
Then I like really started to like Shawn Michaels, because now I'm starting to realize like this guy is a really good performer.
He really is, yeah.
Like he makes everything look real, and then he's going up against Bret, who makes everything look real.
100%. I always say though, let me ask you something about Shawn though. And this has always been my opinion, so I'm curious what yours is. I have been a Shawn Michaels fan my entire life. Since I was a little kid, I thought he was charismatic, great in the ring. He just had that charisma, you could say, I guess, right? Mm-hmm. But, as a kid at that time, he was a little too flamboyant, a little too sus. Was it? Because I always want to ask people that were alive during that period. I'm like, well, it was kind of hard being a Shawn Michaels fan until like 97, 98, when he started being like a dick Shawn Michaels DX. But like prior, was like there's Bret, who was kind of like Canadian cool.
With Jose Shawn, who was,
but then there's Shawn Michaels like stripping in the ring, and dancing with little kids, pulling his pants down. It was kind of hard being a Shawn Michaels fan. Do you ever find that?
For sure. I mean, but if you'd be a liar if you said you didn't do that pose,
Yeah,
the pyro
100%.
pose and all that shit.
Sing his theme song.
Yeah. And again, at that time, it was still dude, all the girls like this guy. You know what I mean? They would show whoever the hot plant was in the crowd, and then they had Pamela Anderson at WrestleMania. So I was and even then, I didn't have the grasp of this guy's kind of gay.
I didn't know. As a kid, I didn't know. My brother would say to me, you like him? He's kind of back then it was okay to say, but he'd be like, oh, he's kind of gay and stuff. And I'm I don't know. I like him. I don't know. What does that even mean?
If you really think about it, he wore more clothes than most of the guys wrestling anyway.
Yeah, and then I also always say I kind of feel bad for the kids that just grew up with Shawn Michaels that came back in 2002. Don't get me wrong, he was a hell of a performer. He was
Great
probably
run.
his peak as a performer, and he was still the same old Shawn Michaels. But it's almost what you can say about Eminem as a rapper. Shawn Michaels on drugs was a whole different beast as an entertainer.
I think, and as somebody who is, I'm in recovery myself, so coming from sometimes drugs make everything go the right way in terms of entertainment. And it's just part of these people's personas, sadly, but it is. It's I compare it to John Jones, right?
Yeah.
John Jones was the baddest motherfucker on the planet. He still is. But he was the baddest motherfucker on the planet when he was just being a fucking idiot.
No, and that's when I feel like Shawn was the best. Also, times change too, the way that WWE does stuff when it comes to scripts and mellowing everything in and micromanaging everything. But man, Shawn Michaels 97, 98, when he was peak asshole backstage, peak on drugs, peak just
everywhere,
ego to the max, but also insecure. That Shawn Michaels was the best Shawn Michaels.
But even then, though, if Shawn Michaels was 1A, just chicken shit heel, Stone Cold was 1B.
Yeah.
Because
coming up at that point.
He was coming up. He just won the King of the Ring. So it was just and even then, Jake the Snake Roberts, obviously everybody knows.
And just the feud with Bret Hart at the Hart family was just, Austin was the man.
With Brian Pillman, he's cutting crazy promos. You know what I'm saying? If you put the letter S in front of the Hitman, that's exactly about what you got to think about Bret Hart. You're I remember watching that and being oh shit, man, he's calling him the shit man. So even then I was
that was the first time as a kid that where I was no, I am the biggest Bret Hart fan. Bret's my guy. Anybody that Bret faced was Bret first. Even when he faced Shawn, I was no, Bret first. But when Austin started cutting promos and Bret and stuff, I'm why do I kind of like this guy?
Because I always think of Stone Cold before the Vince McMahon era. That's an easy era to fall in love with. Who doesn't want to beat up Vince McMahon? This is great. But I just remember watching him even matches with Savio Vega and shit. He was just you could see in his entire demeanor that he was just different than everybody else. So and another thing was too all these wrestlers had long hair.
Yeah.
And he was bald. He was different. You know what I mean? This guy's drinking beer. These guys are doing heel shit, but they're not slugging beers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that came a little bit later, but to see Stone Cold just have black trunks, black boots, and just cut promos and also just have amazing matches with people, it really didn't get any better than that. So once he beat Shawn at WrestleMania and Tyson put the shirt on him, that's when I was oh, now it's our moment. This guy's going to be the fucking face of the company.
Because he somehow it was a changing of the tide too, because you got to look at that era specifically. Bret and Shawn, that whole new generation, they were pushed as mega baby faces, but that white meat good guy baby face. Yeah. Austin came in then before Austin broke his neck with that match with Owen. He could go in the ring. He was a mechanic, but he came in there with a different attitude. It was heading into the attitude there, but he came in there with a different attitude. He was trying to be the ultimate bad guy, but he was so good at being a bad guy, and the fans were changing. Those people that grew up with Hulkamania as little kids were now teenagers, and they had that angst and that same type of rebellion spirit in him, that when Austin started being that way, it's hard not to like him and over the guys that were like the white meat baby faces. And then on the flip side, you change the channel and the bad guys on Nitro were cool. The NWO was cool. Everybody was looking for that cool bad guy. So Austin was that cool bad guy for the WWF. Before even DX formed, before the Hart Foundation really popped off as bad guys in the double turn at WrestleMania 13, like you look at late 96 when he's going to Pillman's house with a gun, he's cutting promos and Brett calling him shit, man. He was already the cool bad guy.
Super cool. And the fact that he was able to like go from that kind of anti-hero, I guess, and then just become like a full-on like face, like but like toe the line. But he never did. You know what I mean? Like you could see, like he was always cool with Jim Ross. He was always cool with the people that he needed to be cool with, and the fans too. You know? Like even when he turned heel, like people still fucking loved him.
Let me ask you a question. We're gonna take it back a little bit though.
Yeah.
You said you started watching and you remember like the Mega Powers feud and stuff.
Yes.
This is something that always bothered me. And this, you being a Macho Man fan, I think you might agree with me on this, even though we talked about agreeing so much as sometimes. Like, Hogan was the bad guy, right? That man had lust in his eyes for Elizabeth. As a grown adult, if someone got that close to my wife or girlfriend to that extent, I would also kind of be like,
Yes. And then 100%. Yeah. The one thing I would give Hulkster though is that if you listen to like any shoots about Macho Man, like he was really that paranoid all the time.
Oh, and it worked. It was realistic. It
worked. It was realistic.
Our imitating way.
Yeah. At some point, he's probably just like, this guy wants to fuck my wife. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I just looking back at the angle, they made Macho the bad guy, but I'm like, I don't know. I know Hogan was like the ultimate babyface. He could do no wrong in the 80s. They believe in superheroes. Yeah, they believe in super. Like, this guy's like, I love her too, but I love her like a sister. And Sam's like, no, you don't.
It's just like, dude, just don't fuck my wife. Why do I have to be the heel? It's very true.
And she was a heel too. Like, she couldn't pick whose corner she wanted to be in. Like, what's wrong with you, Elizabeth?
Yeah. And then,
Savage had every right to be paranoid. That's all I'm saying.
100%. I agree. And also, like, another thing, too, though, like, Hogan got away with, like, heelish shit sometimes. Like, when he eliminated Sid Vicious from the Royal Rumble, that's heel shit. Like, why are you doing that?
Coming in the ring and hitting Ted DiBiase or Andre with a chair to help Savage. When anybody else did that, that'd be a bad thing. But Hogan does a heelish thing, but it's okay. He's the hero. It made no sense. But that's what made Hollywood Hogan so cool.
That's what I was going to get into. So, when I saw, like, you know, as a huge Bret Hart fan, seeing, like, the match with Yokozuna and Hogan just comes out and he's the champion, I was very confused at a very young age. I was like, why is his eye all messed up? And then, like, later on, I watched the video and, like, apparently got into, like, a jet ski accident or some shit. But, like, but then I was like, yo, for a second, I was like, oh, man, is, like, Hulk Hogan a bad guy? And then I remember they tried to turn him heel a little bit in WCW. Like they
put him in black and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that era too, and I was kind of like, this is weird. But
they shaved his mustache. They shaved his mustache, so he decided to wear black. He thought, "Oh, I'm not Hulk Hogan no more. I'm gonna go to the dark side." And it was in the feud with the Dungeon of fucking Doom.
Doesn't work for me, bro. But, I remember watching Bash at the Beach and being like shocked. And I never really realized it till years later. Bobby Heenan ruins it.
Yeah.
As probably my favorite ringside talent of all time.
But did he though? All he said was, "Is he the third man?" And everyone was like, "Oh, he ruined it." Like, is he the third man? And if anyone is like a wrestling fan, Heenan's been calling Hogan a bad guy since the 80s. It's not something new that Heenan would assume that Hogan's a bad. He's been telling everybody since the 80s. Trust me, you guys are delusional. Hogan's a bad guy. He's selfish. It's all about him. And then Hogan proved that. Like I think there was something poetic to the fact that if it was Tony Schiavone, well, I don't know who else was on commentary that night, Dusty Rhodes, if they said it, then they'd kind of be like, what's going on? But if it was Bobby Heenan who said it, I almost think like that's fitting that Bobby Heenan would assume that Hogan's a third guy because he always said Hogan was a bad guy.
But like, see, for me though, it's like everybody knows. They know that Hogan's the guy.
Yeah.
So, and my thing is just let him walk down there, and everyone's like, "Go get him, Hulkster." They just dropped the leg on
I did hate how Savage was the target for like months after that, though. They always were just shit kicking Savage, whether it was with Slim Jim, spray paint. It was just Savage. It was like, why? And then Savage never even. The one thing that would bother me till the end of time is that Savage never got a clean win over Hulk Hogan. Not once. I think he got a couple of DQ and count-out wins, never a clean win over Hogan. After in all the years they wrestled each other. And I know Savage probably wouldn't have cared all about the business, but
doesn't work for me, brother.
Yeah, but I think Hogan being a bad guy. I think we both agree. Like I always preferred Hollywood Hogan because of my perception of Hogan growing up. Because don't get me wrong, I never grew up in the '80s when Hulkamania was hot. I grew up watching it back and being like, I don't like him that much. I feel like he's shady. And then like when he actually was being Hollywood Hogan, the stuff he was saying, thinking he built wrestling and it's only popular. Like, those are things he probably deep down inside really believes. Like,
dude, not one part of me liked WCW when I liked WCW as a whole, like I did, because I liked the smaller guys. I liked Dean Malenko. I'm 5'9", so like I was always kind of a shorter dude. So like I was like, oh, like Rey Mysterio's awesome. Guerrero, Benoit. I don't know if we could say that on the show.
Oh, you can say it.
Benoit was great.
Nobody seems to be wanting to hire me anyways. I've been trying for a bunch of years.
Yeah. So I was just like, but I was just like, like these guys are fucking cool.
Yeah.
And I remember the Four Horsemen. Like we had the Four Horsemen in like my second, third grade class. Like we had four friends that were Four Horsemen. So I was like, I was more into WWF, and then when the NWO took over, I was like, anything bad like against the Machine, I'm going with.
Yeah.
So I loved Razor Ramon. I wasn't a huge Diesel fan. Never really was.
I don't think I liked Diesel until he was Kevin Nash.
Yeah, I didn't like Kevin Nash until he was Kevin Nash too. Because like Diesel was kind of like he's too big. I didn't like the match with the Undertaker's good.
95 was just a weird year, I think.
Yeah, but like he still had really good matches though with guys that could work, like Bret and Undertaker. He had really good matches. But once you saw like these guys didn't like give a shit and like you really didn't know what was going to happen week to week on both shows, how could you not love both?
That's true. Once WWF started picking up and trying to like literally actually compete, then it became like, oh, it was weird because like 96, like WCW was way better, and they had the little guys. They had that variety. Like that's what one thing I think sometimes like even with AEW right now, like I don't want a show full of flippy shit. Mix it up. And that's what I thought we were going to get when they first showed up. Like, WWF sometimes is just, that's a whole different story, but I just love the mixture. So, like, why is 205 Live still a separate brand and not a part of Raw?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, you can have them wrestle the first match of the night instead of throwing some dude out there, whoever's the biggest heel in the company, talk shit for 35 minutes.
And have you ever
way too much talking. There's way too much talking.
I don't mind the talking part, but like just mix up the wrestling. I don't want to see I don't want to see one match go 3-4 segments with commercial breaks.
No. And then the thing is too, it's like one, I will say this, I think WWE's done a great job with being on TV still through this entire Corona virus. So like I really do think they've done a great job with that in terms
100%.
of like, having the Thunderdome, having shows, being able to try and get people into shows in terms of like, WrestleMania is going to be in Florida next year, so we'll definitely have some people. Well, in 3 months, they'll have people in the stadium, which is good. But their thing always with me is I think the show should be 2 hours long.
100%.
It's
mostly Raw.
Long. I can't get through it. You know what I mean? And like it's easier to like watch the show on YouTube.
And no disrespect to like WWE, because like I with the network I've gone back and I've watched Nitros, right? And Nitros, there's been Nitros that like in '97, and you look at the card and it's just stacked with people. Whether it was the top of the card was Savage, Hogan, The Giant, Lex Luger, Sting, and then you go to the middle card and it was like Eddie, Jericho, Benoit, Malenko, like just so much.
We knew at that time though that shit was awesome. It's not like we're watching it later and being like, "Oh, yo, this was so dope." Like we grew up in it and we knew it was awesome.
But I'll even say when the Nitros became 3 hours, even watching on the network, I'm like, well, when did these Nitros get so long?
I remember that too, and like my parents would be like, "Yo, like you have to go to fucking sleep, bro."
3 hours is too long for wrestling.
He's like, Sting's in the rafters. I need to stay up for another hour.
No, 100, and that, yeah, nothing will hit like Sting coming down from the rafters. But I just think 3 hours is too long. How about are you enjoying SmackDown right now? Because I'm really enjoying SmackDown, but it's 2 hours. You got Roman on there, you got Sasha, you got Carmella, you got Owens, you got Bryan. It's 2 hours. Like it's easy.
I'll tell you this. Carmella's grown on me a lot.
Thank you. I'm always saying I understand why people might have not liked her, but I'm like, yo, every time she's given an opportunity to either carry the belt or be in a big match situation, she delivers. And two, like I'm the biggest Sasha mark out here. Like she's my favorite female wrestler. I'll say Carmella's a better promo than Sasha without a doubt.
Yeah, I think in terms of where she started, like where she is now, like the Rumble match was really good for her. She was really good in that match. I don't care what anybody says. In terms of entertainment, it was good. And like you gotta really think about it. It's like they're still like they still flirt with like this idea of like divas. Like Carmella was like kind of maybe, and Lana's like kind of like a diva.
Yeah.
But like even that, like they're trying to get their work over, which is good. But like Carmella's over, and she's getting better. So like
yeah, they've always been trying to work. They've tried over and over again to like still have women's wrestling, which is I'm so glad we've come where we've come. But they still want that like sexiness with it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think it's okay. You can have both. I never understood that. Like when they had some women there, and I'm like, it's okay to have the women's wrestling. Amazing. Like, we want this, but it's okay to have some women that are still kind of like divas, that are still like valets and managers and just hot and like eye candy. Like that's okay. There's men wrestlers that are serious male performers, and then there's the comedy male performers. Like there's a mix of everything. It's okay. And I think they tried many times to have someone play this role. Like they tried it with Eva Marie, they tried it with Emma, they tried it with Lana, they tried it with Liv Morgan quickly before she just reverted back to the Riot Squad. And now they try it with Carmella, but Carmella's rocking it.
Yeah, she's doing a great job.
And it's actually working, And I think it's okay to have these kind of characters. I think we've over the past 5 years established that the women's revolution worked. We can have really solid women's wrestling. But let them be a little more seductive. Let us have some sexy characters. It's okay, because a lot of people miss that. Like, I am not saying I want titties and bra and panty matches and all that. Like, I'm just saying, like, it works. Like, let it work. A lot of these women are really attractive. Let them be attractive. Like, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Now? No. Can I hear you now? Test? Nope. I'm going to kick you out and bring you back in, okay? Yo. There you go. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sweet. Just go from what I said.
But yeah, no, like what they're doing is like let the girls be sexy if they want to be sexy. All shapes, all sizes, baby. Just go 100%. For it. Let them be sexy. Let them be liberated. Let them do what they got to do. But
I'm with it, and I think because they have a ton of talent and they have a ton of women. Like I personally, like I'm not even trying to be mean. Like I'm happy she's trying, she's doing things, but I don't want to see Lana wrestle. My favorite Lana was when she was managing Rusev.
Yeah. I think they should have like more valets, and this girl Bianca Belair is awesome.
Oh, tremendous!
Yeah,
she's grown on me. I didn't really know who she was. I watched NXT when she was bumping there. I do remember like you don't go here promo and stuff, and I've watched a few of her matches. But like Ashley's been on SmackDown, and like I was rooting for her and Rhea when the Rumble came around. Like that's who I was rooting for, and I was glad it came down to those two.
What I wanted to ask you is two things.
Sure.
One, how do you feel about Edge winning the Rumble? And 2, how do you feel about Christian's return?
Christian's return, super cool. I think it's so crazy that so many of these guys were like forced into retirement, whether it's Brian, Edge, Christian, and now they're all just coming back. Yeah. I still get scared when I see any of them wrestle. I don't know why. Like anytime Brian takes like a crazy bump, I'm like, no. But like, I don't know what the protocol is.
I don't at this point because like, it's like, listen, if this guy's clear to wrestle and he's out there, I hate to say this about somebody, if he gets hurt, it's on him.
No, 100%.
You know,
that's true.
At first when I was just like, like sometimes I would see him take like a curb stomp and shit, and then I'd just be like, I know that's not really, I know it's a work, but like it can't be the best thing for him.
Yeah.
But it's like, as soon as he got cleared to come back, the way the WWE is now, they had to get like probably 4,000 yeses for that guy to come back.
Oh no, 100%.
No pun intended.
No, I think he did. I think he did go, and I think they do have to get a lot of different doctors like okay to be clear them to say they can wrestle again. Yeah. Edge I was happy about. Christian I'm happy about. Christian I'm happy about. I did realize he didn't take those many bumps in the match, and I wonder if he's gonna be here part-time or full-time. Like I thought if that was his last hurrah to be in that Rumble and have it, I was cool with that. But supposedly he's sticking around. If that's the case, cool. And I'm going to break this down to you because I'm very curious about this. But for Edge thing, like, and this is going to go into what I want to say. I'm happy Edge is back. And when he declared himself for the Rumble, he immediately became my prediction. So I'm like, they wouldn't have made him be in the Rumble without having Edge win. Like, all my ideas of Bryan and Shinsuke and all this, I'm like, they're all out the window now because Edge is in the Rumble. I was watching the Rumble, and I watched Raw this week, and I watched a lot of other stuff. And now I'm happy Edge is back. I'm happy Christian's back. I think this is so cool. But then I look at the roster right now, and I'm like, we got Edge, we got Christian, we got Jeff Hardy, we got Rey Mysterio, we got Randy Orton, we got Dolph Ziggler, who's been around since like 2009. We got Drew McIntyre, who's technically been around since like 2009. We got Bobby Lashley's been here since 2007. We got Shelton Benjamin. I'm like, I'm not, no disrespect to these guys, and I'm happy they're all here, but and a lot of them aren't taking top spots, but they're still taking spots. Like, how are any of these billions of people you've signed from the independents, put through NXT or brought to the main roster supposed to shine above these guys? Yeah, there are some made men. There's Rollins and Reigns and Styles that are guys that are made men, but this does nothing for guys like Ricochet, Mustafa Ali, Aleister Black, you know, like guys that are trying to get over, because there's too many guys from back in the first decade of the 2000s still here. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It is really cool. And it makes some old fans still watch because they know these people. But you're not building any real new stars. Imagine, last point, imagine guys, how many guys from 1988 were still around in 2002?
Ric Flair.
Flair, Hogan, Piper, maybe to an extent.
Piper, maybe.
Yes, I guess you can say like Shawn was still like wrestling then in the Rockers.
Shawn, Stone Cold.
But like there was way less than now.
Yeah, because
Hogan was the only one that was still like winning world titles in 2002.
Yeah, which is
out of all those guys.
Which is crazy.
But now we have guys that have been around since like 2002 that are still around in 2021, and that's credit to them taking care of the bodies better and all of that. Don't get me wrong, but it's just like now we don't get that evolution of like there's a new era fully because there's just like a bunch of old guys still here.
Well, that's why I look at like Finn Balor, right? He comes up, he wins the Universal Championship, gets hurt and shit. He goes down to NXT. I don't look at that as going down. I just look at you're going to like a cooler thing that you had a lot more success in.
Yeah, no, 100%.
NXT is its own show now. Like, you know, it's like they call it the minors or whatever they want to say, but like a lot of those people can go at the Raw level. It's just they don't have time. They don't have anything to do for
or they just don't have the same like production and the same backing like Raw and SmackDown. Like SmackDown's so much more of a priority now that it's on Fox that like it gets treated like an equal A show, and Raw is always going to be the baby, and that's Raw.
Yeah.
NXT still doesn't get that love, but I will say this about NXT: like now I mentioned all these guys, Rey Mysterio, Jeff Hardy, like they're here, they're on spots on Raw and SmackDown. Like, why wouldn't you put some of those guys on NXT?
That's what I'm saying. Let them go down. And like even like listen, like I was a big Bobby Roode mark when he was in NXT, and like as soon as he got called up, I was just like, I know they're gonna fuck this up.
But it's just 100% because there's no when they called Alistair up, when they called Ricochet up, everyone's like, "Yo, why can't Undisputed come to the main roster?" And I'm like, "Do what? And do what? They can barely book Retribution properly. Like, what are they gonna do with Undisputed Era?
They don't know what they're gonna do with the Retribution at all.
No, there was no long-term game plan.
There's no payoff. There was no like one huge reveal like Mustafa Ali's the leader. Like they can't do that.
For example, like I kept saying, I'm like, instead of having
if it was
Goldberg, that'd be dope. But instead of having Goldberg facing off against Roman Reigns at the Rumble, against Drew McIntyre at the Rumble, like what if Mustafa Ali won a title shot against Reigns? Wouldn't that have like even in loss that would have put up Mustafa's stock? Like people would be like, oh no, he fought the world champion and put a good matchup against him.
I just think right now with COVID, they're trying to get as many ratings as they can. So
I don't know.
Goldberg still draws a rating, but like I saw like Drew McIntyre and Sheamus, like I don't care about that.
I do and I don't. I know what you mean. Like I remember originally, like I'd be okay to have Sheamus versus Drew McIntyre at WrestleMania because I know that it wouldn't be the main event WrestleMania match. Like whatever Roman's gonna do is gonna be the main event WrestleMania match. But then I forgot that WrestleMania is 2 nights, so Drew should probably have someone that's gonna pull in some ratings to wrestle on one of those 2 nights.
It's like I like Drew McIntyre. I like where he's come from. I think he's done a great job. This guy's been everywhere, dude.
Yeah.
NXT. 3MB, TNA, he's been everywhere. So it's like to see him like do that, and he's absolutely yoked now. But like to see what he was doing and like beat Brock Lesnar so he can go and do whatever he's got to do until he comes back. I think it's good. It's just like Sheamus. It's like they're kind of the same guy, and it's like for me, styles make matches, and I don't think those styles are going to be good. It's going to be an okay match.
I think it's okay for like Fastlane and Elimination Chamber. We got 2 pay-per-views before WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Which is always weird to me.
Sheamus is always in a weird spot every once in a while. Like when he cashed in.
Yeah. It was like
I was like, what the hell is that? And then like this one, I'm just kind of like, I don't know.
Because they can put him there because he has enough accolades and whatnot, but then it's like they never do enough. They never do enough with him in this meantime to make us continue to care about him after the fact.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Another guy who I think that should have got at least one title shot or a title reign was Cesaro. I don't understand how this guy didn't get anything.
I don't know, man.
Because he can't talk. They put him with Paul Heyman for 2 days.
Yeah, that was a bust.
I just don't.
What was it? Brock came back and then he just drops Cesaro, right?
Yeah, he's just like,
And I like the whole Brock Lesnar thing. I think Brock Lesnar is an exception when it comes to someone who's still an attraction. Because I do think when Brock shows up, people give a shit and they tune in. Like, oh, Brock Lesnar. I don't like when he's the champion. That's always been my issue with him. I don't mind him coming there working with guys, but when he's the champ, and it's not that I don't like him as champion. I like the champion being on the show every week. Because the weeks that Brock wasn't there, it almost seemed like back in the day when 90s, like look at the late 90s, like Triple H, The Rock, Austin, Undertaker, everyone had one goal. They just wanted to be the champ. But when the champ's not there, then it's like, fuck you, what are you chasing after? The Intercontinental title? Like that's the main title now. Like,
and you think they're grooming Big E to be the champ?
I think they are, but it's not working so far, from my opinion. Just my humble opinion. It's just not working so far. Like something still needs to change. Like nothing's really changed. He's still, and I know he's like, well, the New Day, we were funny and we were ourselves and we got over like that. Like I can get over being myself this way. I'm like, you can to an extent. Like there needs to be some level of seriousness,
And then obviously like what they're doing with like Roman. Like I've heard like rumors that they're gonna try and go like a little more PG-13 with stuff. And I think they have been.
I think recently Roman said in an interview, I don't know who it was with, maybe with Ryan Satin, because that was the most recent interview I saw him doing, but he responded to, let's talk about this for a second. So the Undertaker went on Joe Rogan's podcast, right?
Talking a whole lot of shit.
And great, honestly, I started getting sick of Undertaker interviews, but this Joe Rogan one got me back in because it was like this. It was literally just like a casual conversation about everything and then some wrestling.
Yeah.
But in the mix of it, he dropped the entire, the locker room soft these days, and people took a lot of offense to that, which I want to say, I don't think it was meant to be offensive. I don't think he was trying to say they were soft in the sense of like, they're not tough guys or something, like they don't get ribbed or they don't have to. I think he was saying that it's just like, I think there was a lot of just happy to be there people back there, not really aggressive to like be the top guy or whatever. It's just a lot of people just happy to be there, do whatever they're told to do, and just go with it. I think a lot of people took offense to that, like, oh, well, you want people to get stabbed in the backstage locker room like Bruiser Brody, or you're mad because they're not doing drugs and ribbing people? Like, no, that's not what he meant by soft. I think he just meant like back in the day, you'd go back there and there was like this level of like everyone kind of had a chip on the shoulder. Yeah. Do you think that's what he meant? How do you feel about it?
I think it's just a new generation. Like, it's like a social media era, like video games and shit. Like, these guys are all like, for the most part, younger guys now. Like, especially now that like Cena's gone. Like, who's the oldest guy that's like getting a big push right now?
Probably Orton, and he's not even that old.
You know what I mean? Like, he's 40.
Styles is probably older than Orton, I think. Styles, maybe.
And he plays video games, and AJ Styles is.
I mean, oldest guy getting a push might be Edge, but
now it's Edge. Now it's Edge.
Yeah,
but like it's for me. I just think like the guys were different back then. Those guys, the business wasn't where it is now.
Yeah,
so a lot, like these guys can go to a performance center. Like if you hear like Taker's story, like he had to show up at some dude's house.
Yeah, and he tried to like say like. And he was saying, he's like, oh, those guys in the performance center probably think they have it hard. And he's like, by no means am I saying that's still not hard in a different way, but like, it's not what we had to do.
No,
no. And in a way that does make things a little bit more soft. And I know I think a lot of people took offense by it for the wrong reasons. Like they were like, oh, because they're not out there doing drugs and partying and going to strip clubs and playing video games and calling them soft. It wasn't. There's too many people that get offended way too fast and took it the wrong way.
I think when anything that you're passionate about gets like talked about in a negative light, if you see it that way, a part of you is going to be like defensive like that. But listen,
I'm the wrestling classic. I did not get defensive. I was like, yo, this guy's a point. Maybe it is a little bit more soft back there.
no, but we're marks though.
Yeah,
I'm talking about like actual performers. Like people
to the Roman's point, what he said was just like, oh, it just sounded like an old retired guy trying to say.
Yeah, but and then a part of me is like, is he kayfabing that, or is that what he really feels?
I don't know. I think he has a point too. Like it might just be an old retired guy trying to be like, oh, back in our day, things were like this, and it's like we can all relate to that. Like even with older siblings and cousins and parents, like back in our day, and it's like, oh yeah, like it's still hard, but in a different way.
Right, but I'm a mark. You're a mark.
Yeah.
We can tell the difference, and we're not even in the fucking locker room.
Yeah, I was like, yo, I get what you're saying. I'm not saying that to you guys. Like, I know, and everyone was took it as like a tough guy thing. I'm like, it's not a tough guy thing. I think it was more of just a environment atmosphere thing. Like,
people weren't afraid to rip each other's heads off
or go in there and like fight with Vince to be like, I want this and I want that. And we heard Austin talk about this in this podcast with, I think it was Ambrose, was like, we used to have like a fire. Like, I feel like that fire is missing in the locker room.
Yeah. Do you remember when Stone Cold was on Bite This? So like WWE, I don't know if
I remember Bite This. Their online show back in the day.
Yeah. So for the people that are going to listen, there was an online show, and Stone Cold after WrestleMania with Scott Hall.
Yeah.
They asked him, and he just fucking was shooting hard. He was like, I think creative sucks. He's like, the shit that we're doing now is not good. I think it's garbage. I think
they wanted the NWO to clean sweep WrestleMania. That was the original plan. Until Austin debunked it. Like he went in there and was like, no, that's stupid. Like what? And then that didn't happen, which totally killed the NWO. And then Hogan just turned babyface, and it was a whole different story. But those guys had opinions and they aired them and they fought. I'm not saying the guys, we don't know if the guys today don't do that, but there is a lot of guys in the locker room that probably don't.
100%. I would say a good amount of them aren't going to do that because if you didn't get furloughed, your pay is pretty good. You're working. You don't have to travel, especially right now. But like, I feel like a lot of those guys are just like you said, they're comfortable where they're at, and good for them feeling that way. But don't expect to get a mega push if you're not going to fucking go.
And that comes back to that fine line of how many people are there just happy making the money they're making because they've never made that much money in their life, and they're either putting their kids through school or they're paying off debts and stuff, and they're just happy because of that. Yeah. And how many of them actually care about their creative? Most of the guys that care about that stuff we've seen dip, whether it was Punk or Moxley or whatever. But I think there is a lot of people that work for the WWE that they don't care about pushes or creative storylines. Like they literally just care about getting paid and just doing whatever they want. And there's a lot more of that now than there was in the past, I think.
Yeah, especially in terms
and that's not a bad way to be. If you're that way, that's fine. It's your prerogative. You want to just make a shitload of money? Yeah, save up, pay off your debts, put your kids through school. Fuck it. But it does come off a little bit softer than that old school locker room.
100%. And that's something that they have to understand. Like, listen, like when I played basketball, I'm sure the guys from other eras were tougher than our era. It's just kind of how it is. It's just like with the times. The industry has gotten a little more friendly towards the wrestlers. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
And you can go to the WWE and you can make a shitload of money because now this whole guaranteed contract, downside guarantees that it's not like back then where you were fighting to make more money because you had to be the top guy to make that type of dollar, you know? Like,
but even that though, like even like if you look at it as a certain way, just being under an umbrella of something as big as WWE, that opens up like network shows. You know, there's other content for you to do, and in social media, you build yourself up. Like I always say this too, like Zack Ryder. Like, if it wasn't for the internet, that guy wouldn't have a career.
No, 100%. He blew up with his whole YouTube show, whatever it was called again.
So people gotta like get with the times and like kind of just like do what they have to do to set themselves apart.
But I also see a lot of people nowadays like wrestling in my mind is like one of the only businesses where getting yourself over can almost be a detriment. Like it's a bad thing to get yourself over.
Yeah, especially if it's not on the main roster. Look at Nakamura.
Yeah,
this guy was the man.
Yeah, but no, just like look at everything that happened with the Twitch streams or like people doing their own YouTube stuff or cameras, like anything to get yourself more over. Yeah. Like it's not all. Even Zack Ryder, he did his YouTube show. He got himself over, but they didn't want him to get over. That wasn't their chosen guy. So F that. Getting yourself over in the wrestling, this is the only place I know that getting yourself over is like a problem.
If you get yourself over on your own without the machine, it's a problem.
Yeah, and that's why I'm like, we can say this, like people should do more stuff like that, but it never really benefited a lot of people unless Punk got himself super over and he was still never the chosen one.
Yeah, he was a 1B guy too. That's why I loved him. And nobody wanted
100%. I remember half his title reign Cena was still main eventing against guys like John Laurinaitis.
You know, like I was never a big Cena mark. I respect the shit out of him, but like I was never like, oh my god, like yeah, Cena's here. Like I'd never pop for the guy. You know what I mean?
Same. Never. But I can't remember. I liked him up until 2000. Yeah, I liked him until like 2005, and then when he won the belt after that, I started disliking him.
Yeah, but
and then I started really
was great.
Yeah, and then when everything after like 2013ish, when he kind of started staying out of the title picture more, and he was working with guys like Owens and Rusev, and you know AJ Styles, I was like, I don't mind him as much as I used to because now he's not like hogging that top spot. And guys like Seth and Roman were coming up, and actually they were building a new top card because there was a lot of guys under the Cena era that never got to crack through the concrete because Cena just like held that glass ceiling there, you know.
So you think he buried people?
I don't think he buried people. I just think certain guys look. There's a whole era of wrestlers that were in the Cena era, like Dolph Ziggler, Wade Barrett, John Morrison, that never got to reach their highest potential because it was the Cena era. I think currently, right now, we're not living in an era that really belongs to anyone. You can say Roman Reigns, but not really. He's doing his thing, but you can still build other guys at the same time. When Cena was on top, it just seemed like Cena was on top, and that was it.
I mean, he's definitely on the Mount Rushmore of WWE.
No, I'll never take away his credentials and what he's accomplished.
But him saying like it's called a promo kid, like you're gonna have to learn how to do it.
Yeah,
he's a real professional though.
I always say that too. That's the one thing I'd always say. I'm like, if I ran a wrestling business or a company, I'd want Cena to work for me because I think he's got the greatest work ethic. Like,
yeah, and then behind the scenes, is he a dick? Probably. But like is he a dick or is he a guy that is focused and knows what it takes to be a star in that business?
And not soft backstage. He's not soft. He knows how to play the politics and how to get what he wants and fight for what he thinks is right. Back to your PG-13 thing, though, where this all started from. the reason why I want to bring up the Undertaker thinking about it being soft is Roman also said, like, listen, like, we unfortunately, like, we're handcuffed to this PG thing. Like, we can't get over by, you know, smashing beers and doing middle fingers and all that stuff. And he's just saying he doesn't think he's like, I'm not insulting those people saying that they didn't have, you know, the talent and athleticism that they did, but they also had the benefit of being able to do that. He's like, don't you think I could be doing so much right now with this whole mob boss character I'm playing if I could be smoking cigars and drinking bourbon in my backstage promos? And I'm like, there's a point to that.
There is a point to that, but also another thing too is these shows are all like written for these guys, and that sucks.
No, 100%.
That's what I think is keeping them from getting to where they want to be. Because you could learn to work around like smoking a cigar and sipping bourbon if you could talk a little more the way you want to talk.
Yeah,
you know,
because they have to hold back and they have to remember a script. This isn't, you know, from all of the stuff that we actually loved growing up. And I think AEW's done a good job of letting their guys have a little bit of freedom to be themselves and kind of improvise on their promos, because who knows your character better than the person portraying the character? Who's going to tell you what your character is going to say and how they're supposed to deliver it? It makes no sense. Sure. They can give you bullet points of what they want you to say. You can read the script, but you have to be able to learn how to say in your own voice. There are people in the WWE, talent on that roster has gotten really good to take whatever's given to them and be able to say it in their own voice. I think Kevin Owens is great at that. Daniel Bryan always sounds so natural and stuff. But you can tell when certain people are just trying to read the script because you're like, yo, your character would never say this.
Yeah, and it becomes something, it's like, it just becomes too much of a scripted show. Like, even like, we knew Raw when Stone Cold and The Rock were on, it was scripted, but it didn't feel scripted. Like, a lot of those Rock promos, like, a lot of them were written for him. Like, he wasn't just going out there, like, doing it. Like, that's like a big misconception.
Yeah.
But they gave him just enough to be like, yo, you could play off of this and go.
How would you say that? I think he worked really close to the writer, hence why I think Brian Gertz is like working with him at $7 production now, because I think he worked so hand in hand with them to the extent like, okay, this is what you want me to say. Well, this is how I would say it. And they work together. I think there's not enough of that today. I think a lot of collaboration. I think the New Day works with the writers a lot, from what I've heard. There's some wrestlers that take initiative and be like, no, we're gonna say it this way. We got a little bit of liberty to say it that way, but I think a lot of people,
if I was any wrestler, I would be close to the writers because that's what they're putting on television.
Yeah, 100%. But I agree with you with the fact that it does feel wrestling. Even AEW to an extent does feel too overly produced and too scripted. Like, I don't like the whole concept these days of telling me what's the entire card's going to be before a show.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Like, I don't need to know what every single match or what this guy's coming out to cut a promo. And we're gonna have this match and this person's gonna have a segment. Like, don't. Because the beauty of back in the day, tuning into Raw, Nitro, even just Raws in the early 2000s, is like you go into a show and you didn't really know what matches or segments you were going to get. You knew maybe the main event, maybe one match was promoted the week before, and the rest of it was up in the air.
Another thing, too, is what happened to, like, the cutting away, like, we're at a time segments.
Everything ends perfectly.
Everything ends perfectly. Like, I used to love when they would just be like, dude, like, we're out of time. Like, we got to go. And, like, Stone Cold was still kicking someone's ass. You know what I mean?
Or, like, the small little, this person's coming out here. Like, we didn't know this person was coming out here. Oh, the NWO's coming out? Oh, no. Like, what the hell? This is supposed to be someone else's segment. Like,
there's not enough of that. And
yeah,
I know they're talking about, and then I know they're talking about maybe putting, like, Vince on camera a lot more now.
Yeah.
Which is okay, which is cool. But this is whoever's going to get any time with Vince, this is where you have to try and go. And then, like, people are afraid to get fired. They're afraid to get fired in that company. That's what it is.
That's true. And that's the thing, because everyone's making the money, they're secure, and they just want to stay there.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that.
The people that are, and there is nothing wrong with that, but the people that aren't happy when it comes to the creative side, they will take initiative and be like, yo, I've saved enough money. I paid off my debt. I bought my mom a house. This is like what Moxley said. I'm gonna go try this AEW thing because I actually don't like the creative here. But I think you have to make that decision. And I think some people might get too stagnant where they're like, even if I did all that, like this is what I want to be, this is what I want to do. And then you got to also realize that we're also in an era now where a lot of the people that are in these locker rooms, they grew up fans of the WWE and that was the end all be all. So once they get there, like that's where they think they want to be, and that's it. Like a lot of the wrestlers in the locker room were wrestling fans of this company.
That's the craziest thing
That's more back in the day. Guys didn't care if they left, went to WCW, went somewhere. Because WWF wasn't what it was. Yeah, it was in New York was always the biggest deal.
That's true.
Maybe that was getting money, but now it's like if I got signed to a company and worked for the WWE, I'm like, yo, but I'm working for the WWE. Like I've wanted to work since I was a kid, and then get treated like shit and be okay with it. Like
because your entire roster were marks.
That's something that people need to they need to admit that you know what I
mean?
And that's why I think when guys like Triple H and like Vince have to negotiate with these guys, it might be a little bit easier on their side because well, where else are you gonna go work? We're gonna be here. We don't know what the other company's gonna be. And if you leave, I don't know if the door is always gonna be open.
And then some people are just like, oh my god, I'm talking to Vince McMahon and Triple H.
And then you can sense from some of the wrestlers nowadays. They'll say it in interviews and podcasts they're still intimidated by Vince.
Yeah.
Well, back in the day, I think Vince was obviously younger. He was around the age of the talent, and he had a different relationship with them because there wasn't a writing team, a shitload of producers, all these other people like Mark Carano, the talent relationship. They had a lot easier access to Vince, and Vince was kind of down with the boys. In the 80s, he was the same age as them, and he was going out partying with them, and he had a different relationship in that sense. In the 90s, he had a little bit more authority, but he was still close to age with them, still had relationships with them. It was he was in a war against WCW, so I think he became really close with his talent to be what are we gonna do?
Guys.
Hogan left me, Savage left me, all these guys that were my boys canned me. What are we gonna do to upbring? You know what I mean? Brett wanted more money, we couldn't pay him, we screwed him. What are we gonna do? Who's actually here with me? And then as they progressively became the Walt Disney of wrestling, where they became the machine that was untouchable, the less connected he really seemed with his talent. And I think he is connected to his champions. He's connected. I think the last era of talent that he was really close to was that Cena, Orton, Edge group of talent. And then as we got into the 2010s, it's he's connected to his champions and his top guys. He's connected to Styles and Rollins and those guys. But I still think there's a lot of people that are intimidated by Vince McMahon.
Yeah, and I think one of the last guys to really push that agenda was Jericho. He had no problem telling Vince to go fuck himself either. I think,
but he's from the old school. He's from the
old school. He's still around though. But he's still around. I think some people can learn from what he says. Is Chris? I'm 100% convinced that Chris Jericho's a dick.
I think he was a little bit of a dick.
You know what I mean? And I think to be in that business, you have to be a little bit of a dick.
Or to succeed in that business, you have to be a little bit of a dick. To succeed in that
business, you have to be a little bit of a dick. And I think he has no problem being a little bit of a dick.
And if you heard, I think everyone is kind of be. Everyone's in it for themselves. Everyone's in it for themselves. How many times have we heard that you're lucky to leave the wrestling business with 5 friends? Or Punk said it on Renee Paquette's recent podcast, Oral Sessions, where he's like, yo, when you're in that bubble, you're all in that bubble. The moment you're out of that bubble, nobody calls you no more. You're just not.
It's because they're on the road. Well, before COVID, they're on the road, but even now, they're all quarantined and living in boxes and shit. So it's a crazy business to be in. I would never get into it to make friends. I would only get into it to make money. And I think if more people, most of the people now are just dude, I'm comfortable. I want to make money. And when you can't start a wrestling school.
You can't put the bosses on a pedestal because then you're never going to get anywhere. And I think a lot of people put Vince on this godlike pedestal where you can't know. Let me talk to the producers or the writers first, then I'll maybe go try to talk to Vince. If you're pissed about something, go to Vince. Just go to him. Go to Stephanie. Go to Triple. Just go to them. But obviously, pick your hill to die and make sure it's something that's legitimately right to be pissed about.
I do think I know what you're saying. I do think AEW is a good thing though, just for wrestling in general. Giving people an opportunity to watch some other stuff. They got to clean up their production a lot.
And they kicked off this pandemic with a better production of how to showcase wrestling without fans, but they haven't evolved at all. That it's starting to get stale too. Well, it still looks the same since the beginning of the pandemic. Well, at least WWF went from an empty performance center to using their own talent to now the Thunderdome. They're continuously progressing to make it look better. Where I think AEW, I know they brought some fans in pockets, but it just looks exactly the same every week.
Yeah, and that's okay to an extent, but it's just the show's not being produced well enough for me to all right, I'm gonna watch this full show.
I'm still tuning in every week to watch it fully, but my excitement is becoming less and less because I feel like I go in there, I tune in, and once again, I grew up a character storyline guy, so when there's too much wrestling and it's too much of the same sort of wrestling, I'm like, I just get drained.
It's like I don't want to. It's like if a fucking like 720 frog splash is like doesn't make me jump out of my seat anymore, I'm like, I'm watching the wrong channel. I'm just
and you've been doing it too much. That means you've been doing it too much. Like you gotta rein it back. And originally when AEW started, I felt like we were getting a mix of things. Like you'd get a really good wrestling match, you get the flippy match. Okay, now there's this, street fight, hardcore type match. Like they were giving us a buffet, but sometimes I tune in, I'm like, everything's the same. Even if it's like the guys that are wrestlers and involved in a match, you got someone doing all of their flippy moves in that one match. It's almost like they have so much freedom. It's like everyone's like, I'm gonna go out there and get all my shit in.
Yeah, it's just like every match is like there's like 9-10 high spots. I'm just like, yo, like I'm numb to this now. So like one of you has to kill the other guy for me to pop now.
Can you guys just like lock on a headlock? Like that's why I really enjoyed. I think it was Dax Harwood versus Jungle Boy this week, and I'm like, oh, this is so nice to have a wrestling match on the show.
Yeah, dude, throw somebody in a sleeper hold and talk some shit.
How do you feel about Sting being back?
I think it's cool, but I've had so much of Sting in my life. Because here's one thing that a lot of people don't really talk about. TNA had a lot of huge WWE stars.
For years, I was a TNA fan from I think 2002 to like 2011 is when I fell out.
Like a lot.
Like Main Event Mafia was just like a group of old WWE and WCW stars. That's what Main Event Mafia was.
And then you look at guys that like AJ Styles, TNA, CM Punk, TNA, not long.
Yeah, but he was there.
Drew McIntyre was in TNA.
Bobby Lashley, Samoa
Joe. All these guys.
Kazarian and Daniels.
We're there. They were all there. What's his name? In the New Day. He went by Creed. Yeah,
Creed.
Yeah. Xavier Woods. He was there. So, a lot of these guys came from TNA. So, like, AEW, I think they have a shot to do, they have the Omegas and they have the Champion. They have their guys. But, like, I'm actually excited to see Sting work with younger guys because he could teach them kind of that older style of wrestling and how to apply it, how to actually like work crowds. Like these guys don't really
slow it down and use psychology, not just spots.
Slow it down. Like,
not to quote the Undertaker again, but he said, "Yo, like less is more. Like if you're over enough as a character, you don't need to do that much in the ring."
Nah, they just want to see your finish and go home.
Yeah. Flair did the same thing every night because people just wanted to come see what Flair did.
Yeah, and like what I think Roman's doing a really good job of now is kind of doing that. Is telling more stories now. Like, all right, like this is the Paul Heyman Roman Reigns era.
Through his character,
he's telling the story through his character. And he's allowing Paul Heyman to do it as well, but Roman still has enough individuality with Paul Heyman there. It's not like he's just like staring off like how Brock like never talked really.
Yeah.
And when he did, he was just like calling Seth Rollins a bitch.
Telling Paul something stupid.
Yeah. I gotta feed the Jew. You know what I mean? Like he was always saying something stupid. But Roman's doing the best job of his career of just getting his character over.
And I never disliked Roman, but my issue with Roman was always he wasn't meant to be a babyface. Like it never made sense to me. And it wasn't that he can't be a babyface. He definitely can't be the John Cena babyface. He's the guy that you want to hate. He's good looking. He can go. He's talented. You don't want your girlfriend liking him. Like there's so many things to dislike about him. But I always thought he was good. I always said it's just the way.
I never thought he couldn't work.
It was always the way he was booked. I'm like, it's wrong. It's wrong. And the way they wanted him to cut promos. He's not going to crack jokes like John Cena. He should never be doing that.
No. And even like the Rumble match, like that was a really good match. It just got fucked up with that botch with the handcuff.
Yeah.
But that was a really good match.
And they brought me back. because Rumble matches are draining, and then when you get past one, I was like, oh, why did they make this the rest match between the two Rumbles? Like, I want to be invested in this, but then I'm like, I'm so tired from that women's Rumble, and then yet they were still able to get me into it, and I was into it, and I'm like, oh, these guys, they got me. But whether it was the hardcore stuff or whatever, it's like, no, it's because I care about the Roman character and I care about Kevin Owens and I care about this. They could have had a wrestling match that would have still been invested in how the finish went, you know?
For sure. Now
let's go all the way back to the beginning before we wrap this up. And if I learned anything from this, is I need to actually have you on the TWC show. Because you are actively watching and you got opinions, which is great. No, this is great. I wanted you on there because I obviously, like, I know what you guys have been doing, but I found it fascinating years ago that, like, you guys were wrestling fans. Like, you, Joe, a little bit less than the rest of you, but like Nick, Frankie, like, you guys were all wrestling fans. And I'm like, yo, that's nuts. And I didn't realize you guys were all following my page, and I still seen it one, but I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, all these guys are following my page, and I sent you guys merch, and you guys were repping it. You know, Joe was hitting me up during WrestleMania 33 when the Hardy Boys came back marking. I was like, yo, I almost put someone through my table. Like,
that's true.
And then, you know, I did the show. I did the old Jerks podcast with Frankie and Nick a couple of times.
That's right.
I'm like, you were always hitting me up with random wrestling opinions. I'm like, yo, these guys are like, I don't think that's a side that your guys' fan base gets to see of you guys that often. I know you guys randomly bring it up on your show here and there. You use it for references, but like, it's not always like you guys are real wrestling fans. And I don't think people get to see that. And that was the one thing I wanted people to see through this conversation was like, yo, there's Danny. There's a funny ass motherfucker that sings about titties and makes funny. Cause that's how I discovered you. I didn't know you through Joe Rogan. I discovered you from your titty songs. And then the fact that you guys, we're just big wrestling fans, and I found that fascinating. The biggest thing I want to do with casual conversations is obviously I want to talk to wrestlers and people in the industry, but I'm like, yo, like, I want to talk to these random other public figures, influencers, celebrities that are wrestling fans that nobody had idea that they're like. The Weeknd's a wrestling fan. Imagine I could get him on here. Like, people would be mind blown because it's just like people don't know. Like,
I think
sometimes wrestling fans get a really bad rep.
And that's what I was going to say.
Beards and marks, and they're fat, and they live in their mom's basements. And it's like, no. I think one thing I was able to do as people got to know me, like, oh, he's like a normal dude, but he's a wrestling fan. Okay, there's a lot of us out there that are just normal people that are wrestling fans too.
There is a stigma for sure with male wrestling fans. I've never been one to like judge people for what it is that they, you know, what their entertainment is, because who would I be to judge? Like, I sing about titties and like talk about taking shit on my show. Like, that's just who I am. But I think to people who didn't grow up with it, like grow up with a love with it, like no matter what age, whether you grew up in like the Ruthless Aggression era or you grew up in the Titan Towers era, like, you know, like if you felt that connection to it, it's hard to break. Like, there were a couple of years where I would get away from it, but then I'd be like, oh, like, I'll watch a couple of Raws.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, I'll watch one of the big four, you know, pay-per-views. And shit.
I still have friends that would just want to watch WrestleMania and the Rumble every year, like in SummerSlam. Like, they want to watch those shows. They don't give a fuck about the rest, but they're like, oh, WrestleMania's this weekend? Yeah, I'm going to come over.
But they're still invested. It's like, yeah, like a few years ago, my buddy one time was like, dude, you want to go to Raw?
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'll go. And I had a fucking great time. You know, I think it's because we grew up in it and we loved it so much. It was such a big part of our childhood. You know?
It was.
So it's not going to just go away.
Yeah, and I love it so much. I always, what I've noticed through doing the wrestling classes, when I initially started it, a lot of it was I wanted a cool place for wrestling fans to like get together and talk about wrestling and stuff, because there was a point where it didn't seem like that existed. Like, there was Twitter, but that was mostly like everyone was complaining about wrestling and had like they thought they were right. Well, I'm like, Instagram was this untouched place still, like, and I missed the forums and stuff I used to go on, and wrestling fans had such a bad perception. Like, don't get me wrong, you could go out there wearing an Austin 316 shirt, an NWO shirt, and you will get like a Too Sweet or some respect. You couldn't walk outside wearing like a Roman Reigns shirt, and people go, oh, you still watch that? Like, there's this negative, like, you can wear any football jersey, basketball jersey, I'm Canadian, hockey jersey, and no one's going to judge you. But if you wore a wrestling t-shirt of modern day wrestling, something was wrong with you. You still watch that fake stuff. And I think that stigma's died down a bit since 2014. But it's just everybody was a wrestling fan at one point, and now people are trying to notice that.
I think, like you said, if you wear a Stone Cold shirt, you're cool.
Yeah.
or if you wear a Roman Reigns shirt, you're not. Now, here's what the argument I will make against that is that these guys now do not have a effect on pop culture the way that the old guys did.
They don't. Definitely not.
So that's why those guys get so much love. Like, those guys affected. They like, look at it now. Like, the Migos having Ric Flair in the videos. Like, they're not having Roman Reigns in the video.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know
I mean, Bad Bunny did a song with Booker T, not, you know.
Also another thing, but also another older dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean. Like, not like someone that's, yeah.
So, like, those are the guys that move the needle in terms of, like we were talking about Suck It. Like, you didn't have to be a wrestling fan to know, like, that was wrestling. Like, oh, that
no, 100%.
The wrestling shit. Like, the last guy to really have, like, pop culture is probably John Cena.
You're right. And now he's in Hollywood, which makes sense.
And now he's in Hollywood. And
I mean, they're trying with Roman and Sasha, I would say, a little bit to try to make. She's in The Mandalorian now. Roman's trying to hit some movies and do some stuff. And I think that's why those two are specifically on Fox, because I do think Fox gets an audience that USA and these other networks aren't getting, because like people are coming over from sports. They're watching football and then wrestling starts, you know? They see the commercials. I do think WWE's in a place where they no longer want to get stars over. Like, they don't want someone to get as over as a John Cena or a Stone Cold. They want WWE, the brand, to be over. And when you come to that situation, like, they think, yeah, WWE will always somewhat be a part of pop culture, but it's a problem when none of your stars are, you know?
Yes. So wrestling of what it is pop culture. It is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're still having millions of people watching their shows every week. And I know it's not Attitude Era numbers, but that's still millions of people watching your shit. Like, I don't care what anybody says.
100%.
You know,
but even Joe Rogan, when he saw the people in the WrestleMania, he's like, "Wow, these many people show up for WrestleMania because it is still over." Like,
yeah, dude. Like,
it just doesn't get the respect it deserves.
It doesn't get the respect it deserves because, one, I do blame a lot of shit on social media, but it's the truth. Like, everyone's like a dirt sheet dude now.
I've always tried to not spread rumors and break news. It's never been my thing. I just want people to enjoy it.
Like, yeah, like, I just enjoy it. Like, yo, like, if this dude came back and, like, put someone through a table, like, okay, I want to see it.
This is crazy because I know we can talk for, like, another hour. Because I was about to go into the whole, like, I do also think that the dirt sheets ruined wrestling because, like 100%. You said earlier, like, you didn't have the internet. You didn't know Scott Hall's real name was Scott Hall. Like, you really had to be one of those fans that subscribed to the newsletter or called the hotline to really know that. Yeah. As a kid, I didn't. But now even kids, it gets ruined for them. Like, they go on Instagram to go see what some girl they have a crush on is doing, and they're finding out that, you know, so-and-so's backstage. Like, that's not fun. You know, I went through a phase where I read the dirt sheets all the time, and I kind of stopped a little before I started my page because I'm like, yo, I genuinely want to be surprised. I remember when something happened. I don't remember exactly what it was. Something happened, and I reacted excitingly on my page. Like, oh my God, like, that was nuts. I didn't see that coming. And, you know, people would comment like, well, Dave Meltzer reported this like 2 weeks. I'm like, hey, I don't read that. So that's why I was still genuinely excited. I didn't know that anything was reported. That's why I still had the excitement. That's the best thing about wrestling.
Like, for me, like, I've never been like a Meltzer fan. Like, I don't really care for Meltzer at all.
Same.
But I do
met him a few times. He's a good guy, and I don't disrespect
his
hustle.
I'm sure he's fine. But like, dude, like, you're going way too hard on something that's scripted right now. And I feel you, like, that's like your passion and shit. But like, chill. Like, I want to watch the fucking show.
I just want to watch. Like, I want to be surprised.
Yeah. And the other thing too is another thing that like kids want to understand is like shoot interviews are like my favorite thing in the entire world.
Oh yeah, I like them mostly when the guys are like done kind of with wrestling, like they peaked, they're retired or they're semi-retired, and they're doing them because then it's like that's where all these podcasts are such successes.
Yeah,
Bruce
dude, that's
Richards, Arn Anderson, you know.
It was the pop culture phenomenon. Like, they were like 8 million people plus 10 million people watching 2 programs of wrestling a week.
That's crazy. How do we get back?
That?
They can't even get NXT and AEW to 1 million. It's crazy.
You can't. And
they just need someone. This is if I could give advice to AEW, because WWE is not going to do it. They're just not going to do it now. Let someone get over to the extent where it's like, you know that they're there. Because I love AEW and I love a lot of the talent there, but there's no one that's fully that over there.
No, because They don't have it yet. That's why they got guys like Moxley. They got guys like Jericho. You need established stars. Cody Rhodes, Omega. Like, you need established stars because everyone, even New Japan was like, oh, if you're not watching New Japan, you're not a wrestling fan.
Yeah, well, I don't. Yeah, there's too much wrestling to watch. All
it's like, dude, now there's like everyone was just like, like now there's like an A and B show. I'm like, dude, with the internet now, there's like 400 wrestling allegiances, global factions, and all this other shit. You can't even keep up with wrestling now.
So many things where people are like, oh, if you don't watch this, you're not a real wrestling fan. I'm like, no, I don't have time.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, yo,
I can barely watch Raw. Like, you want to watch?
It's like, dude, you're gonna stay up till 7 a.m. to watch New Japan? I'm like, no.
I do it once a year for Wrestle Kingdom. I can't do that all the time. I'll watch it the next day.
Dude, I tried to stay up for Wrestle Kingdom last year. I made it till like 12:30 at night.
I don't blame you, man. I was
like, dude, I can't.
I'd be lying if I watched it start to finish this year. Like, for one of the nights, I dipped in for like the last 4 matches because I just happened to still be awake. So I was like,
And New Japan's great. I love New Japan too. But like, dude, it's the same thing with music. It's the same thing with podcasts. It's the same thing. The internet is a gift and a curse. Everything's oversaturated.
Way too much. There was a part of me that stopped doing these interviews. Obviously, a lot of it was my page got disabled and Shad passed away, and ours kind of turned into a weekly podcast, so it's kind of hard to continue doing them. But other than those two things, when I was considering coming back and like, let's do these casual conversations things, pretend it's like a season 2 or something, I was like, man, in the time that I stepped away from doing this from June to now, and you can probably relate with podcasts because you've started a new one again. Like, sometimes in your mind, you get in your own head, like, isn't there already so many? And isn't everybody else already doing this? Like, after I stopped doing interviews, like, all these other people just started doing the same interviews, reaching out to the same people, and I'm like, I don't know.
That's the thing. It's like, in any entertainment, I feel like it's hard to take time off.
It is.
It's like the world doesn't care. Like, if you have a bad day, or like, God forbid, somebody close passes or whatever, it's just like the world just keeps moving, man. And for guys like us that are like in the internet entertainment industry, like, yes, there's enough money to go around, but like, it's hard to get to that money. It really is. It is. And it's like,
everyone thinks you just start it and you start getting paid. Like, no, it's consistency, it's time. Like, I don't think I've been doing this wrestling classic thing since 2014. I don't think I really started seeing any money till at least 2018.
Yeah, like, I didn't start, like, when I was doing Vine, I started to see some money then, but then Vine went away and I didn't have any money. I had to go get it on 5 again. My thing was this, is I said, you know what? I've done the 9 and the 5s before. I've done all that stuff. I really, honestly, would rather be a poor fuck doing what I want to do than doing some shit I don't want to do. Because now I'm just being miserable. Yeah.
And then stuck there. And then 10 years from now being like, oh, I got to travel. I got to do the stuff. But then I'm like, I hate my life. Because that's the thing. Everyone's like, oh, they make a lot of money. But then you get to travel. You do that. I'm like, that's great. But I've been on as many trips as I have been on. I've been on some amazing trips, not some. But I'm like, they just end up becoming memories.
Of course.
And then I'm back where I am and I'm not happy. Like, so how do you continuously be happy?
Well, I think a way to continuously be happy is there's kind of 2 ways to go about it, and they both come together in the end.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with finding things that you're very passionate about. As cliche as it is, finding things that you're passionate about forces you to direct energy to other things just instead of being sad.
100%.
Or being depressed or being anxious. These are things that will take time away from that time that you're feeling that way. Another thing too is really honestly expressing yourself and how you're feeling, and understanding how to deal with your emotions, understanding how to deal and express the way that you're feeling. Because a lot of the times when we're feeling, depressed or sad, or we don't travel enough, and a lot of that is exterior bullshit that we see on Instagram, people posting the greatest things of their life and all these amazing things.
Sometimes people forget that Instagram's a highlight reel of the good things.
Instagram's a highlight reel. Like, people need to understand that. Like, there's people who have been married for 40 years, they have children, they do all these things, and they're not happy people because maybe they didn't take the chances in life to do the things that want to make them happy. So, listen, like, in my life, I know that if I had a 9 to 5 and I wasn't entertaining people and making them laugh, I would always kind of have like a hole in my heart. I would.
Some resentment towards something.
Towards myself. It would be
Yeah.
something towards myself, because if everyone around you believes in you, but you don't believe in you, that's the worst.
Or if you're doing something you don't really even believe in,
Yeah, and
just to get paid, and it just, you lose yourself. I was a big Mad Men fan. Like, I love Mad Men. Don Draper's my guy.
Yeah.
But
it is a great show.
That whole and television shows is a whole nother sector we can go into, and music. Those are the other two things I'm very passionate about. But
Me too.
The whole entire he said that whole line, like, happiness is just that feeling you get before you need more happiness. That's true to an extent, unless you're not doing things that make you happy all the time.
Yeah, and
there's a lot of things that will temporarily make you happy. Materialistic things will temporarily make you happy, and it's great to feel that. You know, it is. You know, going on a trip will temporarily make you happy while you're there. But then when you come back to reality, you're looking for more happiness.
Yeah.
That's not the right kind of happiness you're trying to go for.
The thing that really helped me move a little bit forward is like, I had to really start to learn to love the shit that I hate. Like doing dishes and making little shit, like making my bed, like taking the garbage out, like little kid shit, like little things that I fucking hate. I have to learn to find some type of love for this, because one, it'll be easier for me to do it, but imagine the energy that you could put towards something that you love if you could do that towards shit that you hate.
100%.
You know, and listen,
sometimes you have to do some things you don't really like and learn to like it, because it's like, that's how it's gonna work, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, I'm not gonna sit there and like, I love fucking writing, but if I can write about wrestling and get paid for it, I can make that work. You know what I mean?
Learn to love what you hate.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm never saying that a 9 to 5 isn't a good thing. Like,
oh no, it's not.
If a 9 to 5 is what you love to do, and you just want to like cut that check and go home, be with your family, dude, do you? That's what you want to do.
Whatever makes you happy. If that's what makes you happy,
I support the shit. I support the shit out of it. You know, the good thing about social media now is that common interests are very easy to find now, so a lot of people can back each other up and do certain things. But there's a flip side to that coin too. In entertainment, people are fucking assholes.
Mm-hmm. You can't even share ideas with people sometimes, because they'll be like, "Oh, that's a great idea," and then they run with it, and you're like, "Oh, wow, that's crazy."
And that's all I'm saying is, like, listen, anybody out there that's listening, just remember, like, there's a lot of things that come up in your life that you think that you can't get out of, or you think you're going to be stuck in a certain situation. Time is a very valuable thing, and it's also a very powerful thing. So you really just need to choose what you want to do at that time. Like, you need to figure out how you're going to cope with the hardships of your life, and then you also have to learn coping mechanisms on how to move forward with these things. And just try things that you've never tried before, dude. Like, listen, if you want to start a podcast, like we were talking shit about it being saturated, if you have a 9 to 5 but you've always wanted to do a podcast, pick a day every week and do the fucking podcast.
Just do it. Honestly,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
This is the biggest thing, because you'll have a different audience. I was talking about my own fears about doing it again, but here I am. I'm doing it because I know, like, if I'm gonna do it, just do it. I'm gonna have a different audience. I'm gonna have different people on there, and I'm gonna have different chemistry with people. Like, I picked Renee as the first person I wanted to do it with again, because I've talked to her a ton in the past. I'm like, you know what? Like, I know I'll be able to talk to her and I'll kill those nerves. I wanted you on here. I reached out to you and I reached out to Cleo, because you're two people I've had conversations with in the past. I think you guys are good vibes. I enjoy your energy. And I'm like, yo, fuck, let's talk to these guys, you know? And then it just do what you want to do. Like, and I know some people are like, oh, why are you talking to Danny? I've never heard him talk about wrestling before. Here you go. Here you guys go. What did we just do for the last hour and a half? Like,
talking wrestling, and talking about, you know, grabbing that brass ring.
No, 100%. And I think I wanted to give that platform to let people that never really get to talk about wrestling that often to do it, because they've been fans.
I think that's a great thing, because I love talking wrestling.
Yeah.
If you look at my YouTube history, it's all wrestling. It really is. It's like wrestling, like Metal Gear Solid, and meditation. Like, that's
100%. Like, I'm going to let you plug your stuff in a second, but the last thing I want to bring back up, just so we go full circle, even though we've gone so long, is Back to Charlotte. I think
Forgot about her.
I think this whole Ric Flair angle, I felt bad when they brought him back because they just had everyone insult him, whether it was Randy and Charlotte. And I'm like, oh, that's why are they always doing Rick dirty like that? That's fucking stupid. And then they didn't do Rick dirty because they put him with Lacey. Do you think this is going to turn into an entire Tori Wilson, Dawn Marie angle with Al Wilson? Where are we going to kill Rick on TV?
I don't know if we're going to kill Rick on TV, but I think like there's a little room for like a little bit of a risque angle here. I think they could push it a little bit to like
Lacey becomes Charlotte's stepmom.
Not that far, but like a little bit, like where she becomes like the heir to the Flair throne, kind of.
Yeah.
And like Charlotte, you know, is kind of like not looked at the same way as like Rick looks at her. But like Charlotte's already done so much. Like, what the fuck else can she do?
I was already ready for her to get the belt back to fight Rhea at WrestleMania, but then they're doing this Lacey thing. And to your point, like, I don't know why we're having Flair involved with Charlotte again, because it just continues that stigma that Charlotte's over because of her dad. Like, just separate them so we don't have that more.
Yeah, there's too much commingling. But the last thing I wanted to ask you too was another female wrestler, Becky Lynch. Were you a fan or were you up or down?
I always like Charlotte and Sasha more. Becky's my third. I always like Bayley the least, but that was just more because I thought she brought Sasha down. And ever since she's been on the main roster, I kind of really like Bayley a little bit more now too. But
so I just hate her finish.
I think the man thing was sick when she actually was the underdog and the fans were behind it.
Yeah.
Once the machine got behind it, it wasn't ours no more. And when it wasn't ours no more, it wasn't cool no more. Does that make sense?
Same thing with the S movement. But Daniel Bryan got hurt, but like.
But Daniel Bryan was still like the same. But they tried pushing Charlotte like she was like the new face of the company. When it got to that point, I'm like, we liked her because she wasn't.
Yeah.
You know, like
it goes back to the 1B. I love 1Bs.
Didn't they realize the reason why we liked her so much was because she wasn't the face of the company and we were down with her to be that? When you start making her the face of the company, putting her on the cover of the video game and all, and I'm happy for her and all of her success. Like I'm happy for her as a human for that. But as a fan, it's like now it's like even when Austin was on the top, they still made us seem like Austin wasn't on the top. Austin never had like a really successful title reign. He was always getting screwed out of the title. They were trying to find ways to take it off him, and he was always chasing it again. They put the belt on Becky and they let her run with it for a year, and I'm like, no, get it off her.
She had both at one point, right?
Yeah.
I was like, this is too much. You're not the man anymore. Like the man is like the working man.
It's like that. I don't know if Punk cut the promo or Brian cut the promo on scene. It's like, oh, you used to be like you're a parody of yourself now. Yep. You became the Yankees or whatever he said. Like
New York Yankees.
Yeah, like you used to be something, now you're this. Like you're not that person no more. And it's like that's what Becky almost became. Like she was Becky Lynch, and then she became like the face child. And it's like, oh, now it's not cool no more.
yeah. Now it's like it's exactly that. It becomes not cool when the machine gets it.
Yeah,
gets behind it. I'm like,
they should have kept her. I'm like, she was better chasing the title because we got to get behind her when she's actually the champion. I'm supposed to get behind. I wanted Sasha to beat her. I wanted Oscar to beat her. I wanted
everybody to beat her. But
I was still waiting for Ronda to come back and beat her, and she's not even. Both of them aren't even here.
That's true. You think is Ronda going to come back?
I don't know. She left to go have a kid, and then she just never came back and never had a kid. So I think I'm okay with. She came. She did the full-time thing, which I think that gives us so much respect that her first run, she did the full-time thing. Like that's how many people that had the credibility and popularity of a Ronda Rousey comes in and does the full-time thing right away. Like not many. I give her a thumbs up for that. But if she came back as a part-timer, I'm okay with it now.
Yeah, for sure. And then like everyone like gave her a hard time about like cutting promos and shit. Like, dude,
she didn't
understand how hard it is to cut a fucking promo.
And she didn't need to. She's Ronda fucking Rousey.
She didn't need to. And she actually cut a couple of good promos.
No, she did. I just think obviously she had the stigma at the beginning where she was really happy to be there. She couldn't hide it. But other than that, like she doesn't need to, man. They try too hard to overly produce everything. Just let people be themselves and it'll work, you know?
I think wrestling is going to change a lot in like the next like 2 to 3 years.
Let's hope so.
Because I think it is going to get a little more grown up because grown-ups watch TV.
And they're on Fox now. Fox wants it. The USA wants darker content. They got Randy Orton setting people on fire and RKOing girls again. Like,
yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you know, everybody just know that it's scripted. So if you put a woman through a table, she's pretty good.
And those kids that grew up with Cena now want something edgier because they're teenagers.
Yes.
It's the same thing. Those kids that grew up with Hogan, they wanted something edgier by the late 90s because they became teenagers.
Oh, they got edgy.
Yeah, you know, I don't think it needs to go back to that at all, but like,
no.
Just make it a little bit more real again. It's not real.
Yeah, it's like you already changed like rules, like, you know, obviously like no like headshots and like shit like that, but let the content get a little bit darker.
Yeah,
and then we'll see where it goes. Get that 18 to 25 demographic back.
Let Roman drink some bourbon. Let Carmella be sexy. Let everybody do what they want to do, and let's rock and roll, man.
That's it, man.
I appreciate you doing this. Where can everybody find you?
You can find me at Danny LoPriore on Instagram. DM me any wrestling question because I love to talk about wrestling. But also you can check out the LoPriore Podcast, and I have a mental health podcast called Off the Cuff with Danny LoPriore. So you can check any of those out. Come hang out. All the communities are great. I want to thank you for having me on. Me and you always talk wrestling. I'm happy that we were able to do it.
I'm glad we're going to do this. I'm more comfortable. Like, I'm down for you to come on the TWC show if you're ever down. Anytime. That's off camera. We just shoot and we talk about the week of wrestling.
Anytime, brother.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I think that's it, guys. This one a little longer, but you know these casual conversations tend to sometimes because we start rolling, we start going. But appreciate everyone that tuned in, and we'll see you all next time. The next guest, if it is who I think it's going to be, you guys will be excited for. But subscribe to the TWC show, streams on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That's where you'll find the casual conversations. And make sure if you're listening to this to subscribe to my YouTube channel and you can watch it. Other than that, keep doing the thing, embrace the madness, and ooh, yeah, dig it, yeah. Keep it going.
It's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.